Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Big Ten play kicks off for the Boilermakers inside Ross-Ade Stadium on Saturday as Nebraska comes to town for a noon kickoff. While non-conference play didn't go as Purdue hoped, it will look to pull off an upset to spark a turnaround in league play. I'll give a few final thoughts after rewatching the Oregon State game. I will preview Saturday's matchup with the Huskers, and I'll answer your questions on the show today. Plenty to get into. Let's get on into this. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. There is never a shortage of topics to talk about. There's plenty going on in the Purdue sports world. And come join me as I live tweet games this Saturday. If you are not in Ross-Ade, come join the conversation. You can always send in questions for the podcast there on Twitter @BoilersBeyond, or you can email me, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com, and be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a podcast. We will be coming to you every week between, at bare minimum, now and the end of basketball season. I rewatched the Oregon State game as I try to rewatch every game Purdue plays. The CW's playback was somehow even worse than the actual broadcast experience. I really hope we don't get Purdue on the CW again, with all due respect to the CW. Not an enjoyable experience. Some final thoughts. We're through 3 games now, and Purdue's defense has still not forced a turnover. This is something that I guess I didn't quite put together before Sunday's pod. Look, turnovers can be fluky, so it's not something that I'm just going to sit here and scream about how the defense is broken because I don't know that that's fair. But it is a little alarming when you play such an ultra-aggressive scheme. Now, opponents aren't throwing the ball on Purdue either. That's part of it. You're naturally going to force turnovers when the ball is in the air. I mean, when teams are running the ball, sure, you can force fumbles, but I think that's more fluky than interceptions. And Purdue is not forcing opponents to throw the ball. But I think there are only 2 teams in America that haven't forced a turnover so far. That's not great. That's not great at all when you kind of branded this as the airstrike, where you're going to be creating big plays on defense. Purdue hasn't done that so far, and that's concerning. That's a very real concern about this defense among the multiple concerns that exist. One positive on the defensive side of the ball, Kendrick Breedlove is looking pretty good in coverage at that slot corner position. I'm impressed with what I'm seeing from him in coverage. I don't think he's a great run defender, but at that slot corner, you're there to be a pass defender. And as Purdue gets into, some more pass-heavy opponents or more balanced opponents, I guess, because Purdue's first 3 have just wanted to run, I think you'll see Breedlove come into play a little bit. He had a couple of really nice plays in coverage against Oregon State. Look, there's no sugarcoating the loss. It was really disappointing, and the way the game played out for Purdue was a real bummer. But hear me out here. If Purdue kicked a field goal on the first drive where it got 3rd and 2 inside the red zone, fumbles a zone read, say Purdue gets 3 there, and then when Purdue has that 4th and 2 fairly deep into Oregon State territory in the second quarter, say it kicks a field goal there, you're looking at a situation where this is a 24-20 Oregon State lead with 12:49 to go in the fourth quarter. Purdue had scored a touchdown to cut it to 24-14 at that point. You add field goals from those 2 scoreless possessions, it's a different game. Now, you can play revisionist history all you want because Oregon State had a drive that ended inside the Purdue 5 with no points. So that doesn't necessarily work. That's not how football works. And man, what if you score touchdowns on those drives earlier? I mean, it could be 28-24. You're up. Football comes down to the small things. Oregon State doinked a field goal from 52 or so. It's small things. Purdue was not that far on offense from making this a very different game. Now, defensively, the same problems exist. Purdue couldn't get off the field. And on offense, Purdue was completely one-dimensional. It couldn't throw the ball. Purdue didn't deserve to win this game. But it's not out of the picture as to how Purdue could have made this a much closer game where it's in it in the last 12 minutes with a chance to win. I do think Hudson Card is pretty good as a scrambler. You saw him like a 2nd and 23 where he tucks it and runs and gets a first down to get Purdue out of the shadows of its own goalposts. That's a really nice play. He had another couple scrambles in this game that do make you realize that he's a pretty good athlete. He's not, Lamar Jackson. He's not Michael Vick. He's not that, but he can make some plays with his feet. If you had a more stable backup quarterback situation, I think you'd want to utilize that more to help spark the offense. But I still do believe that with where Purdue is right now, you can't afford to have Hudson Card putting himself in positions to get hit. That's just bad news for Purdue. You can't afford that to take place. Final thought here. Purdue goes for the onside kick with 6 minutes and 59 seconds to go in the game when it was down 2 scores. That tells you all you need to know about how Purdue felt about its chances of getting a stop on defense. Because when Purdue goes for the onside kick there, 31-21, 7 minutes to go basically, you're putting them in scoring position to where they're probably getting at least a field goal out of that. You are at that point saying we have to try to get this because we can't get a stop. We can't get the ball back for 2 scoring opportunities in that time. It's a harsh reality. Purdue probably played it right. There's not a right or wrong thing there, but that one really, that's a tough one. When you're onside kicking in that spot, I don't think anywhere like in the book would tell you to onside kick it, but at that point, Purdue didn't really have another option. And that really capped off what was a disappointing day, a day that Purdue needed to go a lot better than it did, to state the tremendously obvious. And now Purdue moves on to Big Ten play with Nebraska coming to town. Nebraska's 3-1. They, too, are coming off a disappointing loss. Theirs came in overtime to Illinois last week at home. The 400th straight sellout at Memorial Stadium, I think it was. It's a game that Nebraska could have and probably should have won in regulation. You got to give Illinois credit. They look like a vastly improved team, as does Nebraska. Both of those teams are better than they were last year. For Illinois to go into Lincoln on a Friday night and win that game that's big time. Illinois goes to Penn State this week. That'll be quite the challenge for them, but Illinois looks better. Nebraska looks better. This is a team that hasn't been to a bowl game since 2016, but a 4-game losing streak in November kept it out of a bowl last year. It really should have been in a bowl game, and that was with one of the worst offenses in America last season. Nebraska had no passing game. I think Nebraska might have thrown for fewer yards per game than Iowa. Don't quote me on that. It was close. They were both down there. This year's Nebraska is not one of the worst offenses in America, and the quarterback play is significantly improved. Dylan Raiola is the signal caller there. He was one of the top quarterback recruits in the country last year. Depends on the service you look at. He was up there with DJ Lagway and a couple other guys at the top. He looks the part as a true freshman. He started for him. He's Nebraska royalty. The Raiola family is a legacy family up there. Last week, he missed a throw that would have won the game. At least probably won the game for Nebraska. Would have put him up with like 2 minutes to go. And that's been clipped all over Twitter. But he's off to a really nice start, hitting over 70% of his passes, 8-2 touchdown to interception ratio. This is going to be the most credible passing attack that Purdue has seen so far. That doesn't say a whole lot. Indiana State didn't try to throw. Riley Leonard wasn't going to throw the ball downfield. And Oregon State didn't really want to throw the ball either. The McCoy kid was all right. He made a couple of nice throws, but this is the first team that actually wants to push the ball downfield a little bit. Raiola does have some nice targets to do it with as well. Isaiah Nair, Jamal Banks, a pair of really nice transfer portal ads. If I'm remembering right, Purdue really wanted Banks out of Wake Forest. God, the portal is so hard to keep up with. But that name, that rings a bell to me. Isaiah Nair coming in from Texas, he can really beat you deep. He had some injury problems there, but he's a talented piece. And these are veteran receivers. These are experienced guys. You got a couple of younger guys that are quicker out there too. Purdue dropping into man, this is going to be where you, I think, get an idea of how Purdue is in the back end coverage-wise. We haven't seen Purdue tested a ton. I mean, Markevius Brown hasn't really been thrown at much. Kendrick Breedlove, effective when he's been thrown at. Teron Grant, Botros Alessandro, last week Joseph Jefferson, different story. We'll see what things look like this week. To me, it comes down to the running game, though. Nebraska doesn't have a great running game from what we've seen so far. It's okay, but can Purdue stop an okay running game? I don't know the answer to that. The last 2 weeks have been an abomination against the run. 703 rushing yards combined for Notre Dame and Oregon State in their games against Purdue. Almost 7 yards per carry. The number is 6.96 yards per carry on the ground on 101 attempts between Notre Dame and Oregon State. That you can't win with that. You just can't. Purdue's only forced the opponent to throw 46 times in the past 2 weeks. 10 of those were Notre Dame's backups in the second half, which was essentially garbage time. Opponents are not throwing the ball on Purdue. Purdue's only covered 56 pass attempts this year, which is insane. We've talked about the problems, defending sideline to sideline and the tackling mistakes that Purdue has made. That stuff has to be shored up. Nebraska has a good enough run game, and it's dealing with injuries on the offensive line. It's got an injury at left tackle, and it's to its second string left tackle. The starter got hurt in fall camp, and it's been a okay running attack. Dylan Raiola doesn't move a ton with his feet. He's not a scrambler, but can Purdue stop that? That's what we have to see here. And that's what I have to see to believe it. Show me. Nebraska's defense didn't have a great day against Illinois. I think it's still a solid defense. It's not like it's some, freaky athlete loaded defense, like a Georgia or something, but Tony White's a really good defensive coordinator. 3-3-5 approach really gave Purdue problems last year. That game in Lincoln was, for my money, the worst game of Purdue's season last year. 99 yards passing on 33 attempts. The key to this is you have to be able to run the ball against 6. If it's a base 3-3-5, you have to be able to run the ball when they have 6 in the box, bring that 7th guy in, and then you start to throw a little bit. But if Purdue can't generate a run game, it's going to be in trouble here. 3 yards per pass attempt last year against this, that's brutal. I don't love, for Nebraska on offense, I don't love Marcus Satterfield, their offensive coordinator, but it's a very well-coached program. Matt Rule, Tony White, Satterfield's been around for a while. This is a Nebraska team that's going to get back to a bowl game for the first time since 2016. This is a solid group. They have concerns in the kicking game. It's not a top-tier Big Ten team, but it's definitively in the middle. You can't say the same about Purdue right now. This would be an upset if Purdue pulls it off. One positive is that it sounds like Nyland Green will make his Purdue debut on Saturday. He has been out since fall camp with a foot injury. He was able to run on it a little bit, and that's really nice. If you're able to get him back, you have your top corner. You should be all good to go. Salim Turner Muhammad is coming back as well. I don't know where he slots in. I don't know how much action he gets. And then Winston Berglund could return to the mix as well. I'll be interested to see what Purdue does there. If he's a little bit quicker than what Purdue has with Jenkins and Karlaftis inside, does he get some run? Do you let Jenkins play a little bit more back at the rush end spot? I don't know. We'll see if Purdue makes a little bit of a schematic change or a personnel change there. But Purdue does get guys back. You're missing the two receivers, Adrien and Smith. Those guys are going to be out for a few weeks, it seems. So defense gets back to full health. The offense, not so much. Got to find something at wide receiver. Cannot have the same lack of explosiveness that you had at wide receiver last week. Some thoughts on this one. Look, the spread's sitting at 10 right now. I have DraftKings pulled up. 10-point spread with a total at 47. Based off what I've seen in the last 2 weeks, and this is kind of the reactionary stuff that's why I shouldn't bet, I'd be surprised if Purdue kept this thing within 10. Over the past 2 weeks, Purdue has not shown you anything to think that Purdue is going to be ultra competitive in this game. Nebraska's a better team than Oregon State. Nebraska's probably not as good of a team as Notre Dame, but look, Purdue has to be better. This is one of those where it feels like either Vegas is smarter than we are, or the market is not fully reacting to what we've seen over the last 2 weeks. We'll find out which. The weather is going to be something to keep an eye on here. There is a chance of rain. I know there's hurricane stuff down south. Does it make its way up to Indiana? If so, does it make it here by Saturday? It's Wednesday evening as I record this, and it's sunny in Indianapolis, but that's a long way away from Saturday. I'm not sure, but the rain would really alter things. Probably, I don't know. I guess Purdue doesn't really want to throw the ball that much, but something to note as well. This is Nebraska's first away game, and you want to have as good of a home field advantage as possible. Dylan Raiola's first away game. Can you kind of rattle him a little bit? If it's raining, Purdue has a great fan base, but I've been to enough rain games in Ross-Ade Stadium to know that the attendance does not overwhelm in rain games, to say the least. It gets pretty thin pretty quick. See what that looks like. Where's this team at? This was a team that no one really knew what to expect, but losing isn't easy, especially when it's unexpected by the margins that it's taking place by. The 66-7 loss is one thing. That's an embarrassment. That's an abomination. But last week was the real slap in the face. It's like I talked about. It's a program that's been left for dead that really ran all over you. And that's embarrassing. Purdue spoke a lot, the players, the coaches, before the season, about being picked 18th out of 18 in the conference in the Cleveland.com media poll, and how Purdue wanted to prove them wrong. But right now, through 4 weeks of the season, looks like they might have been right. How does Purdue respond to that? Does Purdue fight, or does Purdue kind of give up? That's hard. I mean, I know it's easy for folks to, those of us who work normal jobs and don't play college football, to say, oh, you're going to fight all the way. But where's the locker room at? That's important, and that's important for Ryan Walters' future. Purdue's going to need to play really well in this game to have a chance. What is this team capable of? It has to put a better product out there than it has the last 2 weeks. If Purdue looks like it did the last couple of weeks, then Purdue's not going to cover the 10. Purdue's going to get beat, and it's going to be, you're going to be in the spot you couldn't be in, which is 1-3 out of September. 2-2 would be acceptable. 2-2 would be the most likely outcome. 1-3 would be really rough. Right now, 2 second-year coaches here, hired in very different situations, very different backgrounds. But with Nebraska's second-year coach, I think it's hard to argue that they're not, that they're headed in the right direction. If you've got an argument to the contrary, I'd love to hear it. They're headed in the right direction. Where is Purdue headed? That's much more up in the air. I'm going to go 34-17 Nebraska here. Purdue has to show that it can stop the run and that it can be sound on defense. And on offense, it has to get something going. Nebraska is not going to let Purdue run the way it did last week. Nebraska's defense is good enough to prevent that. Purdue's got to throw the ball. Purdue's got to show that its receivers can get open and make plays. And just as a whole, to quote Jeff Brom, Purdue has to have a pulse. Purdue has to fight. Purdue has to show that it's ready to compete. Let's see what happens on Saturday. Q&A time after the break, but as September winds down, this month has meant a lot of things. Football is back. You see the pumpkins for sale, and you see the pumpkin-scented candles everywhere. The leaves are falling. The weather is starting to turn. I'm wearing a sweatshirt while recording this podcast for the first time in months. It's also Life Insurance Awareness Month. As an agent with Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance, my biggest passion is ensuring that my clients have the proper amounts and proper types of life insurance. Give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com, and let's make sure you, your family, and your world are properly protected. First question here in the Q&A, when will Purdue win a football game again? Look, Purdue's going to be favored against Northwestern. That's where I would look here. I think Purdue's the better team in that game. And look, it's not like Purdue doesn't have a winnable game or two before then. Dare I say, Wisconsin doesn't look good. I think Wisconsin might be bad. Purdue goes there next week. Illinois looks much improved. Purdue's had a lot of success in that rivalry of late. I don't see it, but crazier things have happened. Purdue's not going to beat Oregon. So Northwestern is the game I would circle. And really, if you made me pick every game from here on out, gun to my head, I think that's the only one I'd take Purdue in. I'd like to see more from Michigan State. I don't know what to make of them, but that's kind of the one that I would look at. A good one here, would there be some calls to see Brady Allen on the field if he were still at Purdue? I've gotten a few tweets about Marcos Davila the past couple of weeks as a true freshman about whether he's ready to play. So I'm sure if Purdue had Brady Allen, a pretty highly touted recruit in his third season of college football, that there would be folks asking questions about that. Yeah, I think some folks would be there. I haven't paid enough attention to Louisville, but I think Brady Allen's like the third or fourth string quarterback there right now. So I'm not sure if he's panned out the way most thought he would out of high school, which is incredibly common at the quarterback spot. That is not just a Brady Allen thing. You see that all the time. But the backup quarterback is the easy thing to yell from an armchair. It's the easiest thing to, rattle off on Twitter and the replies to the Purdue football account. But Purdue's problems are a lot bigger than Hudson Card right now. When Purdue played a strong offensive line in Notre Dame, or a strong defensive line in Notre Dame, it was completely overwhelmed. Card didn't stand a chance in that game. And against a weaker Oregon State defensive line, when Card had plenty of time to throw, the receivers couldn't generate any separation, and they had a couple drops. So, it's not like the passing game's been great, and it's not like Hudson Card's been Peyton Manning back there, but I don't think he's the problem. And with Brady Allen specifically, if we're going by like 2010 recruiting terms here, he's more of a pocket pass guy than a scrambler. And the one thing that I think would make some big difference is if you have a really mobile guy who you can run around a ton on semi-designed runs, on RPO stuff. That wouldn't be your solution there either. Purdue doesn't have that. So would there be some calls? Yes. Would it make a difference? No. Do you think Indiana's recent basketball recruiting success is related to their success on the football field? Do you think Purdue would land more blue chip basketball talent if Walters could field a more competitive team? No. I think to some degree there's a truth to the concept of a rising tide raises all ships, but I don't think there's a huge connection between Indiana football starting 4-0 and landing Trent Sisley and I guess possibly Braylon Mullins. I mean, Indiana basketball historically recruits pretty well, and its football team has historically not been very successful. This is, on the recruiting side, this is no exception. It's a Southern Indiana kid who grew up an IU fan committing to IU. I don't think Purdue's missing out on recruits because the football team isn't performing very well. If it were, I don't know that those are the guys Matt Painter really targets. That seems like a pretty minor thing from a program that really recruits, substance and character deep down. And not that being interested in football as a basketball player would be a character concern, but I don't know that that's out there at all, that guys are, wanting to go somewhere because of a successful football team, and especially not at Purdue. I don't think that's the case. I think you see some of the basketball success in football, related to football, kind of like Alabama or Tennessee or Florida. You see these programs that have football success, and the money that comes with that has to go somewhere. Revenue sharing now, we'll see, but I think that is where a lot of the correlation would have existed in times prior. This is a good one from a good friend of mine. You have to suffer through one for the rest of your life. Ryan Walters at Purdue or Matt Eberflus with the Bears. Oh boy. Eberflus with the Bears. Coaching matters less in the NFL than it does in college. In the NFL, you have general managers and you have so many people in the building that are helping develop your players that I think coaching is a lot more of firing up your team and making hires around it and things like that. In college, the head coach does everything. Just absolutely everything. So I guess if, things aren't going well for either of them, I'd go with Eberflus, but neither of those are looking particularly great right now. But also, neither of those are going anywhere anytime soon. Question that says, I've got Purdue favored in one more game this year. We knew Braum was going to be a big loss, but this season is quickly resetting the last 6 years of growth back to the dark days. How does Purdue get this ship righted? I think right now in college football, it doesn't take as much as it used to get back to respectability. Look, like Illinois was in a bad spot when Lovie Smith got fired there. And Brett Bielema didn't take long to make them competitive. Look at what's going on in Indiana right now. They haven't played a great schedule, but they're beating everyone they've played. And they're dominating everyone they've played. They look significantly improved. You have to have the right coach. That's first and foremost. And whether Ryan Walters is or not doesn't change the path back to respectability. You have to have some semblance of an NIL collective to help get your roster better out of the portal, to be able to fill holes that your roster has. Because when you exist in the sphere that Purdue does in college sports, you're not going to be able to recruit a loaded roster out of high school. You have to supplement it. You have to find ways to maximize your abilities on both sides of the ball, and you have to find ways to be different. You have to find things that your program can do well that can be the equalizer or can get you above opponents. It's about your roster. It's about your scheme. Those are the two things that it comes down to. I mean, if you have a quality scheme that maximizes your roster's strengths and you have a roster that can compete, especially like in the trenches, can be respectable and has skill position guys that are dynamic enough to make opponents worry, then it doesn't take much. And that's stuff you can accomplish in a year or two with the right guy. Last question here. We all knew Ryan Walters was a risky choice as head coach. Is there any data that would show the success rate of a first-time head coach in one of the P4 conferences? Just how big of a risk is it? I don't know on that, because success rate is very relative. What's successful at Purdue is different than what's successful at Georgia, is different than what's successful at Virginia Tech, and is different than what's successful at Stanford. But I found a USA Today article that reviewed the hires from 2018 to 2021, and it came away with these 4 takeaways. An offensive background tends to be more successful than defensive. Having Power 4 conference experience, at bare minimum as a coordinator, is important. Someone 45 plus years old tends to have the most success. And then you have experience either at that program or at least within the conference. It is what it is. I mean, I'm sure I didn't pay enough attention to the article, but I'm sure that's legit. But this is all a crapshoot when you're hiring coaches. I mean, I've watched college sports long enough. You know, when Scott Frost was hired at Nebraska, there was no way that shouldn't have worked. And it was a disaster. I mean, just what you knew when they hired him compared to what happened in the end could not be more different. You've seen it work the other way. I mean, Jed Fish at Arizona was universally questioned. A guy from the NFL who had like no college experience going to a program that was in a really poor spot. He got them winning right away, and now he's at Washington. That's just one that comes to mind. It's hard. Hiring coaches is really hard. But Purdue took a big swing here. You know, what stands out to me is, it kind of shows where Purdue's spot in the pecking order of the Big Ten is. But the last couple of years, you know, Nebraska gets Rule. Wisconsin gets Luke Fickell. Fish goes to Washington. Michigan State gets Jonathan Smith, who made Oregon State competitive. Indiana gets Curt Cignetti. UCLA, Deshaun Foster. Northwestern, David Braun. The latter two are a little different. You know, Foster was really late in the process when Chip Kelly left for Ohio State. David Braun didn't really give Northwestern a choice. He won too much as the interim. You couldn't get rid of him. But only 2 of those guys, Deshaun Foster and David Braun, didn't have a lot of experience, and the first 4 were pretty big names on the coaching market. If you're Purdue, I don't know if it's reasonable to pull a big name like a Luke Fickell or a Jonathan Smith, but those are the big hires in the league, and you want to be better than UCLA and Northwestern. And it doesn't mean that Ryan Walters can't work out, mind you. There is nothing wrong with taking a big swing if you believe in the guy, and clearly Purdue did. The jury's still out. He's not going anywhere this year. Not going anywhere during the season. So we'll see how things go. But the hire stood out a bit at the time as different, as aggressive, and we'll ultimately see where it goes. But it was atypical. It was a big swing, and we'll see what happens. Closing out here, just a few thoughts across the Big Ten. Indiana hosting Maryland. That's a really big one this weekend. IU will play. Maryland's going to be the best team IU's played so far. I'm not super high on UCLA. See what Indiana does there. If it can start 5-0, it has Northwestern next week. So Indiana would probably be 6-0 if it can win this one. On Friday night, you get a classic Big Ten matchup as Washington heads to Rutgers. I don't know what to make of either team. Nice win for Rutgers last week, but Virginia Tech might kind of be a flop. Meanwhile, Washington lost to Washington State, wasn't great. See what they do as they head over to Piscataway. A lot of lopsided games, though, this week. I mean, Ohio State's going to blast Michigan State. That's a 24-point spread. Same deal with Oregon at UCLA. You've got Southern Cal as a double-digit favorite over Wisconsin. Penn State, double-digit favorite over Illinois. The top of this conference, when you just look at like the top 5 or so, significantly better than the middle of the conference from what we've seen so far. See how true that is all year. And the bottom of the league does not look good. UCLA, Northwestern, Purdue, Minnesota, those teams have not looked good at all so far. So we'll keep an eye there to see what goes on across the league. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you guys for spending your time with me. I always appreciate it. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. You can always send in questions there or over email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Subscribe so that you don't miss Sunday's post-game podcast. Safe travels to those of you headed to West Lafayette this weekend, and we will hope for some dry weather for you all. I'll be back here Sunday, probably going to record Sunday morning after Purdue's game against Nebraska. So look for that in your feeds. And until then, guys, enjoy the game and take care.